fascinating rhythm. It's wonderful, long ago and far away. Isn't it a pity? Shall we dance? How long has this been going on?
Antwone Fisher has worked in Hollywood as a screenwriter for more than 26 years. With an impressive 15 film writing projects, script doctoring or script consultant assignments with the major studios. Among those film projects are Rush Hour, ATL, and the classic Fox Searchlight picture, classic feature film, Antwone Fisher, directed and starring Oscar Award-winning Denzel Washington. His autobiographical book, Finding Fish, a memoir, is a New York Times bestseller. Fisher is also a poet, a lecturer, and a children's rights advocate. Welcome to the show, my good friend, Antwone Fisher. What's going on, man?
Nothing much, brother. It's good to be here.
You are quarantining in Los Angeles with Lynette and one of your daughters. Are they both at home now, or just?
No. One's in Santa Barbara, and one was in San Diego. I went to retrieve her, so she's here with me now.
Is that Azure or Indigo?
Azure.
Azure's
here, yeah.
What does the Azure mean?
It's a color. It's blue. This is my favorite color, so I named one of my daughters Indigo.
Yeah.
It's color blue. And a lighter color blue is Azure.
Azure.
Azure. Yeah.
That's what's up.
Azure.
Yeah. You and I met through a mutual friend, and he's a producer, Brad Wilson. I remember the call because I knew you were from Cleveland, but you and we're both from Cleveland, if folks don't know, but people don't know that we didn't know each other from Cleveland. We met in LA. But I was talking to Brad Wilson one day, and we were just talking about Cleveland, and I think we were talking about a project. And he said, he brought your name up. He said, I know Antwone Fisher. I said, get out of here. How do you know the Antwone Fisher? I mean, you mean the guy who the film was about? He said, yeah. I said, well, I've seen the film. I'm from Cleveland. I said, I feel like I kind of know him. He said, well, I got him in my phone right now. We were in the car. And I don't know if you remember this, but Brad called you, and you were on speakerphone. He sort of introduced you to me, and then we took it from there. And the rest is history. But I gotta say, man, the first time Brad called you in the car, and I got to hear the real Antwone Fisher speak, I was like, man, oh man, that's some cool stuff right there, Jack.
Now you hear me too much. Yeah, now it's too much. You have to hang up on me now.
Hey, it's just it was so surreal, man. So, but you see, your experience in Cleveland, of course I want to take this back because your experience in Cleveland was as different than mine, but a lot of similarities. So what was it like for you? Because your story, for those who have not seen the movie, your story is quite compelling. You have had a wonderful journey, and you were born to a teenage mother, and you became a ward of the state. You were in foster care. Can you share a little bit about what Cleveland was like for you at that time growing up?
Well, aside from the treatment that I got from my foster parents and their family, Cleveland itself, for me, was a really great place to grow up. I mean, the community I lived in was called the Glenville area.
Yeah.
And the streets that I lived on had, huge 100-year-old Victorian-style houses. And people really took care of those houses. Mm-hmm. And, Cleveland, the nickname is the Forest City. So there's trees everywhere, which in a neighborhood like mine helped to cover up some of the scars and the time-worn buildings and houses. And it really made for like a storybook kind of place for a kid who hadn't experienced much in life yet. It was kind of a storybook kind of a place in the seasons, walking to school in the winter, sliding on ice, and in the fall, kicking leaves all the way to school as a little boy. And then in the spring was my favorite time of year. And it would, Cleveland stayed overcast maybe 6 months out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're born into that, you look for the rainbow in it all. And I really did enjoy growing up there.
Yeah.
In that city,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's nothing like, a good snowball fight in Cleveland, man.
Well, I tell you, if you're a kid, you can always find work in Cleveland because in the winter I shovel snow.
Yeah.
In the fall I rake leaves.
That's right.
In the summer I cut grass, and in the spring I took a break. So if you were a kid and didn't have nothing to do, and you needed money, and your parents didn't have a lot to give, you could always find a way to make money as a kid, and that was always something good too.
Yeah, you in one of your interviews, it's interesting. Like I told you, by me doing this interview with you, I was going to find out things about you I didn't know, and this little tidbit was interesting to me when you said in an interview that a social worker left you outside Cleveland with $60 and told you were emancipated. Was that scary for you, or did you feel liberated at that? Did you feel emancipated when that happened?
Well, the whole idea of being emancipated was a total surprise to me. I was in a reform school when that social worker wasn't really a social worker. They couldn't find a place for me when I was 14. So they put me in a place called George Junior Republic. It was a detention home for the kids who were there because a judge sent them there. But I hadn't done anything wrong, but it was difficult to place me, so they placed me there. And so they moved my case from child welfare to the juvenile justice department. So I had not a social worker, but more like a parole officer or something like that. So this was the guy who came to pick me up from George Jr. And he drove me back to Cleveland, and he told me that I was being emancipated, and I didn't know what emancipation meant. So I asked him. He said, well, it means that you are going to have to provide for yourself. You're going to have to get a job. You're going to have to find housing, and you're going to have to find a way to feed yourself. And of course, it was all a shock to me because, I hadn't even turned 18 yet. But he was telling me in a couple of months, you're going to be 18. And they had reserved a room for me at a men's shelter in downtown Cleveland. And he was driving me there. And of course, I was shocked and I was angry. And, the one thing about him is that later I realized what he told me was true. He says, don't feel sorry for yourself because it doesn't do any good. And it made me even more angry. But, a kid in my situation is exactly what I needed, was the straight talk, because it would have taken too long for me to get past if he was just telling me things to try to make me feel good. I might have latched onto that and not faced the facts of my situation. So when he got me to Cleveland, took me to the men's shelter, and he helped me get my stuff out of his car, and he gave me $60, and he said, remember, you have a couple of months before the county is not going to pay for this room any longer. So yeah, and I wasn't the only one, which was the real trouble, because there were other kids. The following day, I started running into kids who I knew from the orphanage, and they were in the same situation. Either they were going to turn 18 that summer or fall, winter, or they already had turned 18. And so, and the unfortunate, so many unfortunate things that this thing led to like a domino thing. All the hustlers and pimps and drug dealers, they knew that every June 14th there was going to be a new group of foster kids who were going to be hitting the streets with no guidance, no family, no nothing, and just started swooping people up. And to avoid being hungry and to avoid being outdoors and to avoid being taken advantage of, a lot of the foster kids, went with them and latched on. And
You mentioned you collected money for a local pimp named Butch.
yeah, Butch, what I realized early on, like there was a kid named Leslie. He was a friend of mine from the orphanage, and I don't know, it must have been just a matter of days. He was prostituting himself. And I remember we got in a fight because he was telling me what he was doing, and he was saying it was a way to make money and resolve our issues. And in a way, it sounded like he was trying to invite me to come along and do the same thing. And we got in this big fight, and I realized that everybody wasn't going to be able to make good choices. And I didn't say it like that in my mind, but later, this is how I interpret it. Good choices during this time saved me. But I did meet Butch, and I would see him around, and he asked me, what was I doing? He knew I was a foster kid. I guess he might have assumed it. But he said that he said, you need to fix your situation up. And he said, after talking to me, I don't know where he got this from, but he said, you have the makings of a world-class hustler and a doggone pimp. That's what he told me.
Wow.
And I was thinking, me? I'm the virgin man, And then, but he gave me a job, I would pick up money from the prostitutes, hold his gun. And man, I never had this on me, but, he was being a father figure to me. I had never had any Chuck Taylors. You remember those?
Oh,
sneakers?
yeah, the Chuck Taylor.
Yeah.
Man, they were like, everybody had some Chuck. Yeah, exactly.
They were the shoes. They were the equivalent of Jordans these days.
Yeah.
But anyway, I all my childhood friends, not all of them, but a lot of them, I admired those sneakers. He bought me a pair.
Yeah.
And back then there was a material called gabardine. He bought me some gabardine pants, right? And you remember when they had those rayon shirts, and this one had pictures all over it. And man, I was looking pretty cool. And he told me that if things work out the way he thought they would, that he said that I'm gonna put you in some gaiters. I was trying to figure out what did he mean by gaiters. And then when I realized he was talking about alligator shoes, that worried me more than anything, because I couldn't even imagine myself walking around Cleveland with a pair of alligator shoes on. It was too gaudy, too pimp-like. They had different colors. Back then, they didn't have the wild colors like they have now, but they definitely had some alligator shoes. And I would not, in any era of my life, wear alligator shoes because of that.
Them guys in Detroit, they be wearing alligator shoes. The Detroit guys, they're a little bit more flashy. But did you ever get a triple fat goose? Did you remember we talked about a triple fat goose? Remember the triple fat goose?
Yeah, well, they didn't have the triple fat gooses in the 70s, but that tickled me so much when you brought that up, because when you say a triple fat goose, most people, unless, a New Yorker would definitely know what a triple fat goose is. But explain to your audience what a triple fat goose is.
Okay, for those of you who don't know what a triple fat goose is,
three-quarter triple.
It's a three-quarter. It's a three-quarter jacket, but it is full of goose feathers. I mean, that's what they say, and it's a big puffy jacket. And you talk about a warm jacket, man. I had a three-quarter triple fat goose, and you couldn't tell me nothing. You that with some Timberlands. It was like the code,
What would make it triple fat, though? What would make the jacket triple fat?
It was just so big. You felt like you were like in a big marshmallow, and
That's right.
And you just felt it was the thing. It was the thing. If you had a triple fat goose, and you were black, you were in the money at that time. But I think that was a little bit after your
my time.
time. Yeah, but you would have
Yeah.
had one. You would have had one because you seem
Yeah,
to.
you know, at that time, of course, I never would have been able to afford one. But you remember maxi coats, the maxi. I guess they would come almost to your knee, but not
Yeah.
real long. And they usually had a belt that you would tie, and then also they would come in leather or cashmere. That
Yeah.
was the '70s, and the London fog. Sometimes the
The
people would
London
wear London
fog. Yeah.
fog, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
You joined the Navy. How did that come about? How did that come about? Because there must have been a lot of instances where you were at a crossroads of like, what do you do with your life, and the Navy comes about, and this, for anyone who knows your story, the Navy was a huge step in a positive direction for you. How did that unfold?
Well, I had a long summer, and it began with being dropped off at the men's shelter. And it's
Hmm.
a long story, but I was homeless. I was able to stay with a few people during the summer,
Hmm.
and then as seasons changed from summer to fall and winter, I was literally on the street
Mm.
in this Cleveland. I know a lot of people live in cold communities, cold cities, and Cleveland can be a beast in the winter.
Bone chilling.
And yeah, and that winter was cold. And I didn't have any parents, I didn't have any
Mm.
relatives, and I didn't have anything. It's a long story, but one day I was in Maple Heights, which is just a suburb just outside of Cleveland. I was walking down the street, and I saw the sign that said "Join the Navy and see the world." I
Mm.
hadn't had a shower like 2 months. I was hungry all the time. I had actually started taking things from corner grocers. I remember one time I got caught, and they called the police. They held me there, and the police came. The guy took me out. He said, "What are you doing?" And what are you doing? This is a police officer. And I told him a little bit of my story. He gave me $5, and he told me not to come around there anymore. And I just started feeling more desperate.
Mhm.
2 days before Christmas, December 23rd, 1977, was the day I saw this sign that said "Join the Navy and see the world."
Mm.
And I went into the recruiting office, and I told them I wanted to join the Navy. And it's a long story, but I always had a difficult time taking tests and things like that. Later on, I was diagnosed as being dyslexic, which
Mm.
explained a lot of why I didn't do as well in school. But I was so worried about taking this aptitude test, and I didn't qualify for any schools, but they said I did qualify to be, to join the Navy. And the following day, I was in Great Lakes, Illinois, in boot camp.
Wow. Wow. You say that, uh, the Navy is where you found yourself, where you became a man. Was it the discipline? Was it the mentorship? What was it about the Navy that really helped you grow up and become, start the trajectory of the Antwone Fisher, we know today?
In the beginning, it was basically a place to be because I was sleeping outdoors and it was very cold.
Hmm.
And I would slip into the Longwood housing projects, and I would sleep in the boiler rooms and in the corridors and things like that, which I would always get ran out of the buildings. And so to be in a barracks, sleeping in a bed, that was really uh, safe and great for me. So
Hmm.
all I could think of is I got to get out of boot camp. So I kind of did a step at a time,
Hmm.
getting out of boot camp and passing that. And once I did do that, I remember thinking like, wow, I was always told that I would never amount to anything and nobody wanted
Mm.
me in the whole thing. And there I was in the drill hall, and I was graduating with all these other kids, and I was just thinking, I wish somebody could see me, because I was really fit like everybody else, and we all had on the same uniform, and they sent me to San Diego, and then started another stage of my development, socializing, learning to talk to other people, and learning how to choose friends and how to be accepted. And that was a long process because I didn't get a chance to socialize in the way that a lot of kids do when I was growing up. I had other things on my mind, and I wasn't putting myself out. I was always worried about what people would think about what I said. So I would hardly talk. And then in the Navy, I realized everybody was saying crazy things. So it didn't matter what people thought. I learned that. And, and then I was making money. It wasn't a lot of money, but I was making money. I was working every day. There was structure. And like you said, there was guidance and mentorship. And, I felt like I could stay in the Navy forever because it felt safe. And, I was traveling around and, the world, and eventually, traveled really around the world. And I remember the first time I left the United States, and I was just so amazed. I remember I was in Hong Kong, and I was just walking. I was by myself, and it was kind of British in Hong Kong at that time. And I thought, wow, I wish somebody could see me. I would always have this feeling like I wish somebody could see me. And I remember I had been to Hong Kong so many times, and I was walking down the street going to my favorite restaurant one time, and this woman, shopkeeper, she came out. She was sitting down, and she stood up and came out and said, "Hey, where have you been?" I'm like, I'm an American. I thought maybe she thought I was a British subject or something. And she said, "I know. Do you don't remember me?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I remember you, but you remember me?" She said, "Of course." And I thought to myself, how could someone in Hong Kong remember me? I would always think about, why would people remember me? Because I felt so unremarkable as a kid growing up. And then when I got into the world and traveled around, you go to places over like Australia, Tasmania, and New Caledonia, all around the world, and people would see you, and I was just, I became a man of the world, sort of. And I wasn't afraid like I was when I was younger, when I first joined the Navy, because some of the things that we were allowed to do showed me that there was no need to be afraid. Now I had different kinds of fears. Like I wasn't afraid, like when I was a kid, I would run from people. And I had this thing, and then they would chase me down, and we started fighting. Right? Cleveland, if you're a kid, you're gonna have to fight, living in the hood, right? So anyway, most of the time I would win the fight out of just sheer anger that I had stored up inside me, and overdoing it, And then I remember a guy asked me, kid, he said, "Oh, why do you always run? Because, if I see, you beat him. Why would you run?" I was thinking, because my foster mother told me if I ever got in trouble, they weren't going to come to rescue me. I could not get in trouble. And fighting was especially if the school found out you were fighting, then it turns into this whole thing. And I had a social worker, and my situation wasn't like everyone else's. And I realized that. So I would take off. And, I looked like a chicken running, right? But I wasn't a coward. I was kind of a chicken in a way because of my circumstances, but I wasn't a coward. If you caught me, we'd have to fight, right? And you may lose.
Well, and also you tire them out. It's almost like the rope-a-dope. You run, they're tired, then they catch up with you, and you already had it figured out, so you had enough stamina to
Let me tell you my favorite. I would run, and then when I realized that they're not going to give up, I would run and slow down a bit, and right when they take off more because they feel like they're going to catch me, I would stop suddenly and get on my hands and knees right in front of them, and they would crash into me and flip over me, and then I just get them. That was my that was my thing. If people decide to run after me. I'm gonna do the same thing. Yeah.
You know what? There's a story that literally last night when I read this story, I literally laughed out loud for about 5 minutes. Tell us about this story. When you had some haberdashery made in South Korea, you said that you guys had the whole day planned for you had planned this outing for months, and you were all running up to the club's main entrance half naked, wearing no shoes.
Well, we were stationed in Sasebo, Japan. We were living in Japan, right? And so in South Korea, you could get clothes made. You could get shoes made, belts, all kind of things. So we had discovered this club in Fukuoka, Japan. We had discovered it because Chaka Khan had come there and she sang there, and so we went to see her. But we liked this club so well that we wanted to come back in better fashion than we had the first time. So we were going to go to Korea, and so we decided to get clothes made. So this was very nice. They made the clothes for us. They were all tailor-made suits. Back then, people wore suits. And then these shoes, I had some eel-skin shoes made. They were like maroon. They were really nice. And so we all took the train from Sasebo to Fukuoka, went to the hotel we had picked out, and then we all got dressed. We looked like, like the Temptations or New Edition. We were all in there putting our clothes on. And then it had started drizzling, but I didn't think anything of it. But by the time we got out, it was raining, really. And so the club wasn't that far. But by the time we got there, halfway there, we were soaking wet. And then our clothes start coming apart, like at the seams, like the shoulders. You get a lot of tailor-made clothes made. Well, I don't know what kind of thread they used or what was going on, but everything started coming apart. And we probably shouldn't have worn the shoes so soon because they came loose as we were running through the. It was so funny to us because by the time we got to the door of the club, we were like,
oh man,
half naked, and so the guys at the door, they were calling cabs. You could wave them on, and we would jump in the cab, and it was embarrassing coming back through the lobby of the hotel. But we were laughing. It was funny.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. That was a hilarious story. You spent some time in Hawaii, which is pretty amazing. My son lives in Hawaii. What a beautiful state. Just the spirit of aloha. I'm sure Hawaii had an effect on you as well, about all the places you got to travel, huh?
A part of, I was 20 years old when I arrived in Hawaii, and Hawaii was very different from Cleveland.
Yes.
And I was stationed in Pearl Harbor, and, Pearl Harbor is pretty historic, and that's where I lived. And eventually I moved into an apartment in Pearl City, and then I was stationed in Wahiawa, Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. Mm-hmm. So being an inner city kid, when I first got there, I didn't know how to have natural fun. There's waterfalls and trails and
ocean,
beaches,
the
ocean, the whole thing. And so I like some of my other friends, was just stumped by what to do, and it was there I discovered, hiking and, going to the beach. I didn't realize you could go to the beach at night, that was a thing. Yeah. And we would take our boom box to the beach at night and just laugh and talk, and it was great. It's a different feeling. I don't know about now, but back then it was a different feeling you get. It's a little, Oahu could be dangerous too. Mm-hmm. But at that time, maybe because of my youth too, I did not have the same feeling of the urgent feeling to watch after myself or keep, in Cleveland, you got to periodically turn around and see what's behind you. Mm-hmm. I didn't have that feeling anymore. And I learned that traveling, like in Japan, it basically, I remember I wrote about this. I remember it was like maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. I was walking back to the base, and there was this woman. She was walking toward me, a Japanese woman. She had her purse and her other belongings on her arm. And I was walking past her, and when I walked past her, she didn't have any fear or anything like that. And I thought to myself, where I grew up and where I was from, a person would cross the street, or they would have turned around and dipped into some other street or something. And I just, and I just knew that about Japan after living there for a while. But that really stuck out in my mind, that, being a young black guy, I always had to try to make people feel that I felt obligated to make people feel comfortable. I was a good kid, but I still had this. Well, I think a lot of us who are black have this. You don't want people to be afraid, because it's, you're probably more afraid than they are. But but she it just really taught me something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even traveling taught me something, a difference in how I was being treated in America as opposed to when I went to another country, and how they viewed me, and how it was just different.
Yeah. Were you writing the whole time? Like, so when did you start to put pen to paper?
No, I was horrible speller, all of that, and I was intimidated by because I couldn't read. I knew, not like my fellow students. When we had to read in front of the class, I had one experience when I decided that I would refuse, even if I had to be sent outside of the classroom. I would not read in front of people. But I didn't understand why it was so cumbersome for me. But later, as I told you, I was diagnosed being dyslexic. In those days, nobody ever, try to see what the deal was with me. But I was encouraged to read a book, and the book I read was called The Greatest. It was about Muhammad Ali. And I read it, and it took me maybe 3 or 4 months to read the book, but I was enjoying it so well. And I had a limited vocabulary. I used the words that I grew up using in the community where I was from. So leaving that community, of course, people speak differently. So you add a few words onto your repertoire, right? But then when I read that book, I realized you didn't have to phrase things the same way all the time. I started learning that, you could use words and say the same thing, but say it in a better way, or say it in a way that make people think, or like a thought-provoking way to say something. I didn't realize that. So I fell in love with words. And then through reading that book, and then reading more, I realized there were even more words. And these words were in a dictionary, but it's hard to read a dictionary. You're just looking for words, so wouldn't know where to start. But that's how I started to enjoy words. And I was writing poems and things like that. And even when I was younger, it wasn't really poems. I would write down how I felt. Like if somebody upset me, I would write what I'd like to do to them, or I wish this would happen to them. Or if I liked the person, I would write, oh, wow, I found a friend, or I like this girl, and this is what I wanted to say to her. I would write it down. But of course, I would destroy the paper right away because I was a shy kid, and I didn't want people to know that I had these kind of feelings. So I was a pretty stoic kid, So when I was on the USS, matter of fact, it was the USS Cleveland. That was my second ship. It was an LPD, which is a troop landing ship. We carried Marines. And so LPD 7. So when I went overseas on that ship, we had Marines with us. And there was a ship's paper, and I had wanted to put a poem in the paper that I had started writing poems. I thought it would be a song, but it seemed more like a poem. and I put it in the paper. And the person who ran the paper, the ship's paper, asked me if I would put a poem in every month when the paper come out. I said, yeah. So the sailors started teasing me around the ship, start calling me Sweet Mouth. And so they named my section Sweet Mouth, right? I said, okay. Well, I am still a United States sailor, right? So,
Right.
and I did come from the hood, so we can get in a fight here. Anyway, I put up with the jokes and stuff like that. But people start coming to me and say, hey, man, we've been going like 2-3 months, man. I want to say something to my wife, man. And I sent her your poem that was in the paper last time. She really enjoyed it. Can you write one for me, to my wife? And I started writing poems for the sailors. And I would charge them $5, $10, depending on how well I liked them. And so then that's when the power of writing started to come. Like, people were enjoying it. And a person who didn't ever really have a girlfriend like that was able to write poems, love poems. And probably because I grew up listening to soul music. It was all about breaking up and making up and falling in love. So this is where I was getting all my information from. So I was inspired by soul music, and that's where I got a lot of the feelings I had when I would meet a girl. I would interpret it in the realm of the soul music and the lyric that I would listen to. So after that, I wasn't intimidated by writing because I had fans who liked my writing, and I didn't think that I would ever become like a screenwriter. I didn't even know people wrote movies, and so that was the what started me writing. But when you're in the Navy, that was one ship, and by the time you move to your next ship, you're not doing that anymore. This ship doesn't even have a ship's paper, and so. But I've always been an artist. I play the bass guitar. I draw and paint. Mostly I love acrylic painting and painting in watercolors, and drawing and writing and, editing and that kind of thing, film or footage. And so this is one thing I think when you have a kid, and if you can help them discover what talents they have, they shouldn't have to wait till they're 40 years old to discover that they enjoy drawing. Or, it's a way to relax as well.
Yeah, it's a great creative, way to express, your feelings and, and your emotions. How did you, why did you leave the Navy? What led to you leaving the Navy before you became, because after that you became a correctional officer, and you had an honorable discharge. What led up to you leaving?
Well, every time you re-enlist, you have to get discharged. So I had several honorable discharges. Well, what really led up to it was that I was growing up and I wasn't afraid. The kind of fear I had when I was homeless was different than the fear that I would get if I was getting ready to fight somebody. I had a steady hum of fear that I relied on. I wasn't afraid of being afraid, not this kind of fear, because it would always warn me. I would feel something, like my antenna would go out, and I would feel like, why am I feeling this way? You look around and you don't see a reason why you should be feeling this way, fear, but I listened to it and just would leave the area anyway. Sometimes I could see exactly why I'm feeling this way. So I learned to rely on my fear, and I wasn't afraid of being afraid. And when I was in the Navy and I realized I wasn't getting that feeling anymore, I became afraid, again, a different kind of fear, that I had lost one of my superpowers because the fear had left me, and I needed to have it with me to help guide me. And so then I realized I was becoming an adult, and I was shedding a lot of the things that I used to keep myself alive and going when I was younger. So I was growing up, and I had been around the world more than once, different areas of the world, more than once. And then I started wanting more independence, meaning I appreciated the structure. I appreciated even the lifestyle. I enjoyed being a sailor and the whole thing. But there was something I wanted to take care of myself. I had this thing. I was a foster kid in the state, and the county took care of me. They paid for my living,
Mm-hmm.
and I joined the Navy. And then every check that ever came to me or about me had some kind of government seal on it. And I just felt that it was time to let the people go.
It's so interesting how you were driven by fear, and then you confronted the fear, and it was the fear in the confronting of the fear that moved you to move beyond to the next step of your evolution. So you just knew that it was time to move on and to take on the independence, like you mentioned. But what's interesting to me is that you chose to put yourself in an environment that is a very intense environment, being a correctional officer. Like, of all the things, was that like
first of all, I decided to get out of leave the Navy. The feeling came gradually as it comes to a kid who's living with their parents and feel like it's time to get their own apartment. It's time to get my own place to live. So it was more like that.
Yeah.
But there were some things that kind of led up to it, but this kind of like the same thing.
Yeah.
I felt that I was full. I was full of information about myself. It was about me and what I needed to be able to continue.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I was on so many ships, I was in the Navy for 11 years, and I was on 6 different ships. And out of the 11 years I was in the Navy, I was at sea for 9 years, which is really unusual. Yeah, because when I was on one ship and we were overseas and I came back, they call them deployments. We came back, I would get transferred to another ship that was going back on deployment. And I did that like 1, 2, 3, 4. I did that 4 times. I was on 4 deployments, 4 or 5 deployments. So I had, and when you deploy, you travel. The Navy goes from country to country, and I was so familiar with some places in the world, it wasn't as interesting to me anymore. And the adventure that I had discovered early on. I wasn't marveled about the ocean and the different things you learn about the world and how small it is based on how quickly you can get from one country to another. I learned a lot in the Navy. The only place I hadn't been was the United States.
So you're right. That makes sense, right? Because you went from Cleveland to traveling the world, and then your own country, you didn't really know. That's so intriguing.
Yeah, and I can remember when I first came back, I was coming through LAX, and I hadn't seen a lot of Black people before, African Americans, because I was always overseas.
Right.
I was so excited. I was walking to the airport, I was giving everybody, "What's happening, brother? Hey, how you doing?" And they were looking at me like, "What's up with this dude?" I was just so happy, so to be back, in my familiar. But I was still in the Navy when I came back. I got transferred from Japan to Long Beach, California, and they put me on a ship called the Mount Vernon, the USS Mount Vernon, which was another amphibious ship. I was in the amphibious Navy. Most of the time I was in the Navy. And so those are hard-working ships where, we take Marines and their equipment to wherever they need to go and service them and that kind of thing. So that's the Navy I was in. The Navy has a lot of different, kinds of jobs they do. The ships do different jobs. And, so anyway, so I was back on in the Gator Navy. So I thought to myself, I don't know if I could go further because I was ready to leave home, basically. So being in Long Beach, I could look for a job. And while I was still in the Navy, a lot of guys, they would get out of the Navy and then they would go home to their grandparents' house or to their parents' house or cousins or some family member where they could get on their feet while they don't have to worry about the roof over their head paying for it. Well, in my situation, I had to find something before I got out. So I applied. When you're in the military, just like when you're in college, the FBI and the CIA, a lot of those kind of organizations come to the college and they try to recruit you. So when you're in the military, it's kind of like the same thing. But one of the ways I learned about Federal Bureau of Prisons was through being on the base. And so, they know where you've been. They can get your service record and look to see and who you are. And still, they're going to investigate. The FBI is going to investigate you before they hire you. So anyway, I applied, and they hired me before I actually was out of the Navy. And I never really took leave. So I had like 30 days of leave that I could do. So I left the Navy 30 days early. And so I went to the prison at Terminal Island. Then they sent me to Glencoe, Georgia, to the Federal Law Enforcement Academy. And I went through boot camp there, and they sent me back to the prison at Terminal Island. And so I was, not that I outgrew the Navy, but I was ready to go. And the job as a federal corrections officer was available for me to join the Bureau of Prisons. So that's what I did.
That was on the West Coast.
Yes. Terminal Island Prison is on an island that is between Long Beach, California, and I don't know. Wait a minute. Where is it at? It's an island. Let's say it like this. Terminal Island is an island off of Long Beach.
Yeah.
And San Pedro.
Okay.
And so on this island, there is a federal prison. And it's a storied federal prison. Al Capone was there. And when I first started working there, it was basically white-collar criminals there. But when they started the war on drugs, then drug dealers and other kinds of criminals there were there.
Did your background help you in that particular environment with being able to relate, empathize with the mentality of some of the guys, some of the prisoners?
Well, it cut both ways for me. I was institutionalized from the very beginning of my life, so I did understand what it was like to be restricted. That was a different kind of restriction, but I had been restricted in my life, all my life. So some of the simple things that I could allow, I would. Only, not that because I felt sorry for people, it's just that there's a kind of humanity that came over me, just letting people do things like staying up to watch television an hour longer, but then there was always a reason, like if this was cleaned up, if this was taken care of, then yeah, you can do this. We had a little bit of discretion, but some officers wouldn't allow anything. But at the same time, I was born in prison, so I felt like, this is back where I started, and putting handcuffs on people. While that was a part of the job, locking people up and that kind of thing, over time, I realized it didn't suit my personality to be a federal correctional officer. Not that those people didn't deserve to be there. Because let me tell you, once you learn of some of the things that people do and have done, you gotta have a way to set them aside. And what really got me was a mentality that was being created inside me. So when I wasn't at work, say I was in a supermarket, I felt like I could look at people and see if they were prisoner material. I could look at a person and I could tell if he had been or she had been to prison or been released recently. And I could just, and sometimes, maybe they call it profiling, but let's say if you were a painter and I called you to come and paint my house, but I didn't want you to just come and paint it and then give me the price. I want you to give me an estimate. And as a painter, a painter who's done that job for a while should be able to come to your house and look around, walk around it. It can tell if you need to repair some wood or some stucco, and you might need some wood replaced and that. And so he would give you an estimate. Same way if you are a correctional officer, been doing it for a while, and you've been talking to inmates, and these are not just inmates. They're inmates because they're in prison right now, but before that, they were doing other things. So you just develop a way of reading people.
Yeah.
And so I, like not just me, but like other correctional officers, some people might call it profiling, but as a correctional officer, as a part of protecting yourself, you do have to estimate this person.
Yeah.
Because you could be in danger. When you work at a prison, they lock you in the cell house. Generally, just you, maybe 150 inmates. So you have, the only way you can prevail at your job is to have allies while you're there. So you have to have the ability to be able to offer them something. I'll offer you the ability to, let's say, watch television an hour longer. You can stay up, but the lights have to be off. And you can, there's little things, very little things you can offer them, but for them, being locked up like that will be huge things. So you learn how to survive, and a part of that is reading people. And so I have been reading people my entire life. I was living in a house where people were molesting kids. You have to read the personality of the people, especially in the winter time when most people are in and you can't go out and disappear for the day. I learned how to disappear right in front of people. And people would scream at me, like, where have you been all day? Of course, I've been right here. And I just learned how to do it. And when I was homeless, I learned how to read people, read the streets. I just learned how to do it. Doesn't mean I was a tough guy in the streets. It just means that I understood the city and the community where I lived, and I learned how to read it. When I was in the Navy, you travel to different countries, and every country is different. You have to know yourself, and you have to know your environment. If you don't know your environment, like if I was in Hong Kong, I don't know Hong Kong. So I don't do things to put myself in harm's way. So I stick close to where the ships say these areas are the areas that's safe for you to be. So I would be there.
Right.
So I've been reading situations and reading people my entire life. Sometimes it was my job. Sometimes it was out of necessity of survival.
Right.
And it's helped me as a writer, because I've had to evaluate personalities within myself. And because I've had a kind of a full life, I'm having a full life, I've come across a lot of interesting people. And a lot of writers who go to college and they haven't actually really lived. Where would they get these personalities and know to draw from? I draw from my life experiences of traveling, of being a ward of the state, or being in a reform school, or being a federal officer, being homeless, traveling the world, and being a person who works in Hollywood is another experience. So, being a father, and
Yeah.
trying to navigate the world as a black man. That is another job, that you have to. I always say, this is the first time in history a black man can walk into the bank with a mask on, and not get the police called on him.
It's so true.
It's true.
I never thought about that. It's so true. I mean,
dude, let me tell you.
Wow.
We talk about the conversations that we have to have with the younger people in our lives. Black boys, you have a son, so people. I don't know. I don't even want to get into the reasons why people do the things they do, or treat me or African Americans the way they do. I don't want to get into that, but I do say that as we grow up, we learn how to survive within that. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, I never go into the bank. Me, I wear a hat and sunglasses all the time. Mm-hmm. So I would never go into the bank with hat and sunglasses on. Mm-hmm. I go into the bank. There are men and women who are not black who have hats and sunglasses on. But when I come in, it's always like, I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. And I'm not like a robber or anything like that. I would never do anything like that. But this is the reality. People, just like I evaluate, I give estimates when I was a prison guard and just growing up. When people in their experiences and the way they think, when they see me, I do believe that they see me, they estimate me and see something either they fear or that they hate or they don't trust. So as a black person, a man who wants to survive, wants to just go into the bank and do his business and leave, you have to undo yourself to make yourself.
Yeah.
So you're constantly throughout the day, undoing yourself and reassembling yourself, because you have to reassemble when you go back into your own community. And then when and it's not that you are giving over anything. It's just that you understand. When you go hunting, you gotta pack some stuff. If you want to go camping, you gotta go pack some stuff. So I know instinctively how to behave. So I won't get hurt. It's about not getting hurt.
Survival. It must have been a trip when you got the gig at Sony, because now you were smack dab in the middle of show business. Not on the fringes. I mean, you were literally in the mix as a security guard at Sony. You are the first. This is this piece of history that you laid on me that is quite astounding. Actually, you are the first and only African American to.
I don't know if I'm the only.
Well, to write
to now.
Yeah. To now, to write your own biopic film,
right,
that was produced by a major film studio. Has that happened before you or since?
No.
So
I'm the first.
You're the first and only.
Yeah. Right.
That's astounding.
I'm the first person to have ever written a movie about himself and be produced into a movie.
Yeah. That's astounding. What was it like at Sony? Because the book, the memoir, which has become a New York Times bestseller, came before the film. Did your cohorts and people on the lot know that you had written a book? Had some people read the book before you started reading the screenplay? What was the timeline on that?
Okay, the timeline is that I went to Sony. I left working as a corrections officer, and I heard that Sony was hiring security guards. I didn't have any kids or a wife or anything. It was just me. So I didn't really have that many bills to pay or anything, but I needed to get away from the prison because I just felt that it wasn't for me. I was stressed out and everything. So I was not enamored by Hollywood. I didn't even know anything about Hollywood or show business. I had been a sailor all my life before then. I was just a kid, on the street and that kind of stuff. But when I went to work on the lot, one of the first things I learned that most of the security guards, except for the older ones, had been to film school, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then I remember Damon Wayans worked in the mailroom. And I remember when he first got his office, it was in the Capra building on the Sony lot. And, I didn't even know people wrote movies. I didn't know anything about all of that. So I was just there working because I felt like it was a job that I could get and that I could do. And I would figure out what I was going to do next. But this was what I was going to do until I found out what came next. And so I actually found my family while I was working there. So I didn't write it that way in the movie, because if I had written it the way it actually happened, then Denzel and everybody else who was in the movie couldn't be in the movie anymore. They have to have a whole new cast for when I'm out of the Navy. So finding them while I'm in the Navy worked better. And so, but I had to tell my boss that I wanted to take leave, but I just started working there. And he told me, well, if you leave, you won't have a job when you come back. And I told him a little bit of my story. He said, okay, go on and go. When you come back, you'll have a job. And I came back. I had gotten around a little bit about my story. And then some executives wanted to talk to me. And I kept insisting on writing it because I just felt like, writing poems, I didn't know it was that much different than just writing was writing. And they kept saying no. So I decided that since it was my story, I didn't have to ask anybody anyway. So I had gotten the screenplay and saw how they formatted it. And I had somebody who told me where a free screenwriting class was. And the guy who was teaching that class, his name was Chris Smith. He introduced me to his college roommate, who was a young producer at the time, but it was Todd Black. So I went to Todd's office in Brentwood and met him and told him my story. And he said, well, you should write it. It was the first person that said you should write it. So he took me to Fox and some other places, and everybody kept saying no because I had been a writer and hadn't been to college, no writing experience. So he paid me himself to write it out of his own pocket. Wow. And then, so I didn't want to let him down. My life, when somebody reach out to give you a hand, you do the best you can to not to let them down, Right. So I wrote all the time. I wrote 41 drafts of Antwone Fisher before. Wow. One day he called me and he said, man, he said, I sold your screenplay. You should go down to News Corp and pick up the check. So I didn't have any money. So I went down there and it's the first I saw the check. It didn't have the Statue of Liberty on it or the Great Seal of Ohio or nothing like that. I was thinking, like, this is not going to work. It said News Corp.
How did that feel, man? When that happened? Because did that feel validating in a way? Because you didn't know how well the film was going to do or how it was. But you had your story that was picked up by a major studio at that moment. Was that a great moment, that call?
Well, I still wasn't a Hollywood person or understood anything. Yeah. I didn't, all I knew was, just like when I was homeless, I never thought about the following day. And as times got worse, I wouldn't think about that evening when morning came. And then it would get so bad that I could only deal with the coming minutes. And if I could get through the next half hour, then I'd deal with the next couple of hours then. And it's just the only way I would inch my way through life. And I was still doing that, when I sold the screenplay. So I went to get it and, they gave me the check and, I'm dyslexical. I can't read it right. It turned out to be a lot of money, and then I was afraid to go in the bank, what I mean?
I'm sure you put those numbers together, and so did you leave the studio, working at the studio at that time? Was that enough for you to say,
when Todd offered to pay me to write my story, He also asked me if I would leave the job at security. So he gave me an office in his bungalow of offices on the 20th Century Fox lot. So
So you can
I
focus.
had,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so his partner and his partners helped me learn. They said I had writing talent. I just needed to learn how to write a screenplay. And, I've been writing movies for a long time. And the one thing about writing movies is I still get afraid when it's time to write a new movie because I do have confidence that I can do it, but it's still a daunting thing. And I have to get myself to a place to realize, I can't, like, oh, I'm Antwone Fisher. I've done this so many times. It's just brand new every time. And because,
Yeah.
because
It's so funny you say
new,
that. It's a new thing. It's a totally new venture, and the only reason why I'm jumping in is because when I take on a new role for a show, I feel the same way. The first thing I do when I look at a script, especially if it's like it's a tour de force where I got a lot of words to memorize.
yeah.
I say to myself, how in the hell am I going to learn this script? I literally say to myself, how am I going to retain all of this information? That's the same thing. That's the same thought I have. I'm overwhelmed with how am I going to do this? Now, obviously, I probably for you as well as for me, when you get into the you already, that you're going to get there because you've done it and you know that you have the skill set to do it and you're going to figure it out and it's going to be great in the end because the process just kind of takes over. But that initial fear, I think it's so human, man, and it's cool that that's something you connect with, that you relate to that.
Well, outside of just tapping into the ability to do it, and it is huge. When you think about every character in the film, you have to create. You have to create all the dialogue for the character, and that dialogue have to evolve, unfold a story. The back and forth in the scenes that you create. It is. I don't even think that people who don't write screenplays understand just how difficult it is. It's like creating a new math problem, a huge math problem, and coming out with an answer that everybody will agree with, meaning they'll be satisfied with it. And it's think about it. Every scene is moving toward some sort of resolution, a story that not just that people will understand, but that they will enjoy, and that think about it. A studio will put millions of dollars into something you're sitting down writing. Put millions of dollars into it. People are going to be hired to say these words and to make this story come to life, and they're going to be able to take care of their families based on the money they make from you sitting down and writing this. And then it's going to go to the theater, and the theaters are going to make money, and the people who come to the theater to watch, who need a break, who need to laugh, or they need to feel something, and they need to a break from life, really, will come there, and they'll get that break that they're looking for.
That's a lot on your shoulders. That's a lot.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's just huge. And I don't even think that writers get, when it comes to writing a movie, I think everybody involved, I know they respect the writer, but I don't think that they really, because, a lot of people, you kind of have to make it your own. And some people, you have to believe that this is about me. I'm playing this role, and this is all about me. And this is about the story I'm trying to tell. Who came up with it? Who came up with those lines? That doesn't matter. What matters is, and they're right, it doesn't matter. Every stage, well, if I'm writing it and they haven't chosen a director yet, it doesn't matter what directors think about what I'm writing. Then when it moves on to the director, it doesn't matter what the writer thinks. Then when it moves to the actors, it matters what the director thinks, but the director is relying on the actors to make these, to do their research and research these characters and make these characters become more vivid than they were when they read it. And and then they need help. They need the DP, they need the lighting people, they need the grips, they need, the teamsters, they need everybody to make a film come to life. But it all started like in this solitary room with this woman or man who was sitting there with this just an idea and turned it into 120 pages of a story. And when it comes to pay, writers are probably paid the least out of, well, not the least, but of all the people who are above the line, basically. But everything begins with the writer. And, from time to time, they have to go back to the writer to clarify things or to rewrite things because they can't find a location. Or this is evolved into a different story, something like that. Yeah.
Wow. How long does it take you to typically write a script, just on average?
Well, I'll tell you this. When I first started, I could write it, except for my own screenplay, my own story. When I first started, I could probably write a script in a couple of weeks. The more I learn how to do it, the longer it takes me.
You said to me
it's for real.
You said to me one time that the words are the last part of the equation. The foundation is the story and the scenes that map out the plot, and then you fill in with the words. Is that correct?
Well, I've done that. I've had to write screenplays in different ways in order to make it interesting to me to write. Sometimes I would just write the scenes, the scenes, like the structure of it, and put the characters' names there, but I don't do the dialogue. And I just come back and do the dialogue later. But I have it all in my head. And sometimes I write the scene I want to write most first. Sometimes I write the ending first. Sometimes I just, the dialogue is the train that tells the story. The story unfolds in the back and forth. And of course the scenes help. I think the scenes are the tracks, and the dialogue and the characters are the story. Basically, so you have to move along the structure. If the actors and the dialogue is moving along the structure, the tracks of the story, which are the scenes and different things that help support the actors in the dialogue. But we learn the story and learn to enjoy the story mostly from what they're saying to one another. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. So you and I are gonna have to talk about music because you mentioned earlier how soul music has been the soundtrack of your life. We talk music a lot. So how does music infuse or inform your work as a writer?
Well, music helps to set moods. If I'm going to write a drama, I remember I wrote a drama as about a ghost who was from another time, and then the present was visiting the present. It was a ghost who was visiting the present, and because this ghost came from another time, I chose to listen to that music from that time. So it was Billie Holiday. It was, Dorothy Dandridge, believe it or not, she sang. So I had some of hers. Different music made me feel differently. You have to figure out how to put yourself in the mode to write. You just can't come out with your laptop and go to Starbucks and start typing a movie. I had to bring the lights down low. My wife would come into my office and it'd be so dark in there, and Billie Holiday, and then to keep myself in the room because I have to take breaks to think about things. I
Mm-hmm.
play a video game or I play the bass,
Mm-hmm.
and I could be in my room going round and round, writing, playing the bass, playing the video games, writing, playing the bass, doing video games. Because I realized early on that when I needed a break, I would go for a walk, but then I wouldn't come back. So I had to figure out a way to keep myself in the room.
Mm.
I paint, so sometimes I would paint. I would have different things going at once.
Do you ever get stressed by certain deadlines that may be put on you by a studio? Because, you work for, when you work for the studio, that's a very different construct than, say, you're an independent writer. How do you uh, handle that nuance when you have, people who have big jobs, there's a lot of money on the line, and they've hired you to write this screenplay?
Most studios know that I'm dyslexic, so
Hmm.
you get about 8 weeks to write a screenplay to turn in the first draft. So sometimes I can squeeze a week or two out of them uh, that way. Uh, and still, that's not a lot to create a whole story. But it's just like once you start doing it, and if that's the world we live in, you make it happen.
Hmm.
Just like if you want to be hired again, you got to stick to the rules.
Hmm.
And sometimes I only work for independent producer once, and uh, when people, it's not running and gunning, but it's kind of like that. Sometimes they want it like tomorrow,
Hmm.
and you tell them it takes a while to even come up with the idea,
Hmm.
and then the idea might not be right. You might have to redo. Sometimes you have to just erase scenes
Hmm.
and rewrite them because you don't want to turn in the number of pages that are acceptable. You want it to be good.
Hmm.
And the way you remain in the business is you write, you write well.
Hmm.
There's so many talented people who come to Los Angeles uh, to write, to act, and direct movies, and work in Hollywood. And you have to be better than everybody else. That's the way you have to think. So
Hmm.
you have to always uh, develop as a writer. You have to
Hmm.
always say, what have I stopped doing uh, the proper way? And they're just accepting it because I'm Antwone.
Hmm.
You have to, so I get the reference books out. I make sure that when I turn it in, it's exactly how they expect to see it. They're not gonna, they would ignore it, but it helps uh, keep alive the notion or the truth that I am a professional.
Mm.
And as a screenwriter that happens to be black, I realize when people see my name, they're going to expect a certain thing. They believe it or not, I have to really write in the King's English because, I don't know what it is, but sometimes some people, well, if I wrote in the black vernacular all the time, then the executives may not understand it when I give them the screenplay. The
Mm.
actor may understand it, the director might understand it, but it takes a lot of different people to make a movie happen.
Mm.
So I'm not writing for the actors initially. I'm writing in order to get the story across to the executives. And a lot of executives are recruited from places like Yale and you know Penn and places like that, and maybe not have uh, had many African American friends. So the dialogue has to be in the form that they can understand.
Mm.
And some writers of color are not writing for the executives, they're writing for the filmmakers.
Mm.
Yes, you do have to write for the filmmakers, but first you got to sell the screenplay. First, you got to get the people who have the power to buy it to understand what you're doing and what they're buying. So
Mm.
you have to write it in the King's English.
Mm.
And then when they say, okay, we got this story, we want to make this story, and you give it to the producer and the director, then you can start changing the dialogue for the characters whose dialogue need to be changed because when the actors come along, who are going to say this dialogue. You want them to want to say that dialogue
Mm-hmm.
in the way that that character is going to say it. So sometimes you may have to work really hard to,
Mm-hmm.
to push this thing all the way through because you're writing to different demographics just to get it along the way.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
So
yeah.
a part of what I had to do is learn how to speak English. you, you, you know, but I was a great study of people. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
you know, so everybody, this is America, so we speak differently and
Right.
we speak different languages. It's not different languages, but it's different parts of the country speak differently,
Mm-hmm.
and different demographic in the different parts of the country speak
Mm-hmm.
differently. So it's a really complicated country when it comes to linguistics. Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, the way people speak,
Yeah.
so as a writer, you want your script to sound authentic,
Mm-hmm.
yes, but you do want it to be sold. So if you give it to an executive who don't understand it, they're not going to want to read it. They're going to be like, it's not that they don't want to buy your story, it's just they don't understand it and they
Yeah.
can't see how. Some executives will trust, like if you happen to have been in the business a long time and they know you are a great writer, they sometimes they'll trust, okay, he's writing this, I don't understand what's going on, but let's get the producer and let him read it. Or let's see if this director understands. So some of them understand, but that they're not going to understand these movies, but they're not, I guess they don't supposed to be buying movies only that they like
Mm.
themselves,
Mm.
but that they think they could sell to the people at
Mm-hmm.
large, right? So, so, so it does help. I think it does help to be the way I think about things. I think
Mm-hmm.
it helps me because I understand from my based on even from my earlier years, understanding that when I'm talking to my teacher, it's different the way when I talk to my foster mother. I have to talk to my social worker today. So I have different voices I use when I
Mm.
talk to different people,
Mm.
and in a different way I project myself.
Mm.
So your characters have to be the same way. And when you're dealing with the studio producers and actors and directors, it's the same thing. So it's a constant reading. Everybody's reading everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody's wanting to trust everybody else
Mm-hmm.
because there's their job on the line, there's money on the line, there's a possible bigger future on the line, and so a lot of that comes from what the writer does initially.
Do you still get excited about all of uh, the stories that are in you that haven't been told yet? Does that just
Well,
that fire you up?
yeah. Well, the unfortunate part of it of Hollywood is that a lot of stories that I want to tell, I think they're great stories. I think people would want, but we need to have more diversity in the area uh, of the business where people are choosing the story that
Mm.
get told.
Mm.
You know, like I think, let's say Panther, for example. It was such a movement. It made $1 billion domestically
Mm-hmm.
because people wanted not just to see the movie Panther, they wanted to see all that it was.
Mm.
All the people who never really get a chance. It was marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
And it became people would dress up to go to see Panther,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's not enough really
Mm.
because I think that after Panther, I would have thought that there would have been more movies about people of color, but they're not.
Mm.
And I not only write movies about people of color. I wrote a movie once about a Jewish woman in a convalescent home, and it was a black guy who had spent time in prison, and this was the job he could get at the convalescent home.
Mm-hmm.
And they shared their stories, and and this was the movie, but it unfolds and it's. I won an award for directing at the at the Jewish Los Angeles Jewish Film Festival. Anyway, I didn't know any Jewish people. I knew Jewish people, but I didn't know any old Jewish women like that. So I volunteered to work at the Guardian. It's a Jewish convalescent home on on Fairfax
Mm-hmm.
here in Los Angeles, and I got to know some these Jewish people, these older women, and it was like fun to talk to them, and they understood what I was doing, and some of the expressions that they would make when they would begin to talk about their past or talk about their loved one that wasn't there anymore. I could have never come up with that on my own.
Mm.
So, as a writer, you're not going to get paid by a studio to volunteer at a Jewish convalescent home.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do a good job, sometimes you have to go outside of your normal because it's about you too and what you
Mm-hmm.
turn in.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they read it, some people go, "Wow, how could this guy know this?" Because people have biases.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they realize that you have that ability, wherever how you do it, they begin to trust you, and they stop looking at who you are,
Mm.
your race, and just see, oh, this guy uh, writes well because this I understand. I don't know how he understands it. And sometimes people don't mean any harm. They're not being biased maliciously. It's just the way it is. It's the
Mm-hmm.
way, and you gotta think that way, or you would just drive yourself crazy. Every time somebody say no to you, which in Hollywood we all hear no all the time, but when someone say no, you won't assign it to racism or assign it to bias. So you have to be
Mm.
so good in the room,
Mm.
and people have to like you in the
Mm.
business. So So whether I'm a better writer than you, my ability to reach out to other communities to learn more about them if I'm going to be writing about them
Mm-hmm.
comes through, and that helps. You need other stuff. There's too many talented people here to just make a career just based on your talent
Mm-hmm.
because they have a lot of people to choose from. People work with who they like.
Yeah, that's true. How do you think COVID is going to change the business and the stories that are told? Because we are living in extraordinary times, as you know.
It's interesting. The only real I have supposed to have a conversation with Tyler Perry sometime this month. But when we decided to have this conversation, it was months ago.
Mm-hmm.
But he was getting his cast together for his shows to bring them to Atlanta to
Mm-hmm.
quarantine them so they could make the shows. And he wouldn't be ready to talk until September. And of course, I wouldn't be flying down there. I'll be talking to him the way I'm talking to you now.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, there might be a lot of quarantining of actors and filmmakers and the crew before they can actually make a movie. Some of the movies might get smaller
Mm-hmm.
because small movies you don't need to be outdoors with big cranes all the time. And you
Mm-hmm.
know how movies were. I remember this movie called Lost in Yonkers. It was made over there at Columbia, and I kind of miss those small movies when it was about people and
Mm-hmm.
just dialogue kind of told the story.
Yeah.
And it might go to more of that, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you're right. It's been a real pleasure having this conversation with you. You write poetry. You are doing so much. Well, also, people may not know, but the Antwone Fisher film also became a stage play, and that had a beautiful run. You are doing so much to continue to advocate for children. You speak all around the globe. Are you doing a lot of virtual or more virtual lectures right now as a part of your children's advocacy work? Because I'm sure you're continuing to do that as well.
Right. Well, I think now uh, those foundations and all, they're all trying to figure out how to proceed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in order to stay alive and to be able to continue to provide services
Mm-hmm.
for young people. And it's like a new day, and then we were all caught off guard. So I did one virtual discussion about uh, uh, child welfare,
Mm-hmm.
and it went over great. But it's a lot of the people who uh, do this kind of work. They're not older, but some of them are in middle age or approaching middle age, and technology is always something that people are a little bit afraid of. So
How important is the work? The work to continue to advocate for children out there who are caught in similar situations that you were in. Uh, how important is that work to continue to just be a voice? Uh, are you seeing evolution in the way child welfare is meeting the needs of some of these kids?
yeah, well, a lot of things are a lot better than they were when I was in. Now here in California, if you are college material and you're a foster kid,
Hmm.
you won't be just left out on the street.
Hmm.
You can, let's say, go to UCSB or some UC school
Hmm.
and enter college, and the state will pay for it. And when summer comes or holidays come, you don't have to leave the dorm.
Mm.
They have dorms set aside for foster kids now. And now, there's some other things that have changed. Even the Navy has changed a little. If you had issues like I had when you first joined the Navy and they discovered it, they would put you out in
Mm.
boot camp.
Mm.
But now they'll just set you back a couple of weeks. They created a program where they're trying to help young people. The Navy don't recruit 40-year-olds; they recruit kids. So
Hmm.
basically, kids are unfinished people. They're still being programmed, and
Hmm.
sometimes there's some bad programming going on. So they try to help them out because a
Yeah.
lot of these kids are really talented, and so they want to help them.
Yeah.
So I think society, the Navy's not a social service organization, but it does help the society by like people like me who went in one way and they spit me out another way.
Hmm.
And I was able to do something to provide something for the society
Hmm.
to help. And
Hmm.
so that I give credit to the Navy.
Hmm. Yeah. Man, you inspire so many. You continue to inspire me. As you know, I'm a new author. I'm trying to follow in the footsteps of the great Antwone Fisher. I
Yeah.
wrote this book. It's called The Fine Art of Romance, and I'm going to actually send you a copy because I will love your insight. You've been married for how many years?
24 years.
24 years. So you there's so much wisdom that you have as a successful married man of 24 years. I have to ask you this question from
All right.
from Antwone Fisher's perspective. How would you define the essence of courtship?
You know what? I think it sounds corny, but I think everybody has to uh, be sweet. I mean, you have to be, I guess, vulnerable and real. And it's a combination of things you have to start with being honest. And I think that it's hard sometimes because everybody's not that way.
Mm.
And sometimes when they're not that way, and you're ready to be married and you're ready to find someone good and you think you found someone, you could leave yourself open to be hurt.
Mm.
But when I met my wife, she was 29 and I was 35 or 36. And my traveling and leaving my familiar was joining the Navy. By the time I was 36, I had been to all the clubs, popped my fingers raw. I had traveled around the world. I had gotten punched in the eye. I had been through it all, right? And then I was ready. I had a job. I was already a writer. And, you know, um, I think life has chapters, right? And some
Mm,
people don't know when to turn the page. I think if you live your life and you see it as a book that has 10 chapters, and every chapter is 10 years, and you hope to live 100 years, if you're in your second chapter, your teenage years, or your third chapter, your 20, you have to understand, the pages are turning, whether you want them to turn or
mm,
not. You got to recognize where you are in life. And where I was in life when I got married, I was ready to be married. And not just being married just for that, to have a family. I'd never had a family like that, like I have now. And I have two daughters. I was 37 when my first daughter was born. I was 43 when my second daughter was born. And at that time, I didn't really get distracted. Uh, I still don't get distracted. And so, in the story of my life, having a family had to be in that story. I didn't get it in the beginning, but I have it now.
mm,
And all the hugs and kisses I didn't get as a kid, I get them now.
mm,
So you have to be grateful. Uh, you have to be forgiving
mm,
of people in order to get to a better place.
mm,
And so now if you look at my life, it's jam packed with events. It's jam packed with stuff to talk about. And I'm 61 now,
mm,
and I don't feel that the things that happen in my life at this point are without worth.
mm,
Like if my life was a building and everything that happened were the bricks in that building, if you go to my earlier life when the bricks would be at the bottom, just because I don't like those bricks, they may be cracked and discolored. I can't take those bricks out. I have to watch those bricks, maintain those bricks because they could bring the whole house down.
mm,
Can't remove them because it could bring the house down.
mm,
So you have to keep your story intact. You have to revisit your childhood friends, even by phone or in your memories, and keep your life together, all of it, not just when you start doing better.
mm.
And don't be sad about it. It'll make you feel, uh, it should make you feel differently. Every chapter should make you feel differently. But it's ultimately building a great building, a great house, and that is the story of your life.
Mm-hmm. Wow, man, I appreciate that. I anticipated that you would drop some serious nuggets upon thee, as you always do, man. I appreciate your time. You're a blessing to me. You're a blessing to so many, and I appreciate you just sharing your story, man. This has been a real fantastic experience, and I wish you, Lynette, Azure, Indigo, a beautiful season.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's Antwone Fisher, everybody. My man. I hope you all learned a lot of good stuff that's going to feed your soul on this episode. I think we're going to have to break this episode up into a few parts because there's so much juicy, delicious insight from one of the great guys, Antwone Fisher.
How long has this been going on?
The Fine Art of Romance, A Bachelor's Handbook by Elijah Rock.
Featured in Season 3, in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel as the Baldwin dancer, this dancer is phenomenal. She's worked with the likes of Miley Cyrus and Neil Patrick Harris at the 65th Emmy Awards. one of the best in Las Vegas. Ladies and gentlemen, Reginae Patterson.
Got my tweed press, got my best vest. All I need now is the girl. Got my striped tie, got my hopes high. Got the time and the place, I got the rhythm. Now all I need's the girl to go with 'em. If she'll just appear, we'll take this big town for a whirl. And if she'll say, my darling, I'm yours, I'll throw away my striped tie and my best pressed tweed. All I really need is my girl. I got my tweed press, I got my best. All I need now is my girl. I got my striped tie, got my hopes way up high. Got the time, got the place, I got rhythm. Now all I need is my girl to go with 'em. If she'll just appear, we'll take this big, big town for a whirl. And if she'll say, my baby, I'm yours, I'll throw away my striped tie, oh, and my best pressed tweed.